Hello and welcome to Breakfast for Pancakes. I'm your host, PK Sullivan. Today I'm going to be going over the seasoning and care of carbon steel and cast iron pans. These pans are very old in the history of cooking. They've been around a long time. They work wonderfully when properly handled. These are both bare metal pans that then get seasoned with a patina of oil. What is seasoning? Seasoning is the process by which liquid oil is turned into a polymer and bonded to the surface of the metal. The polymer forms what's called a patina. You can actually see the patina, nice dark spot where the patina has really been well developed. The warmer brown spots still work just fine. They're non-stick. They don't look as nice. Pre-seasoned cast iron comes all nice and black throughout, and through use over the course of a year, I have achieved a beautiful black, even patina across this 12-inch carbon steel skillet. The patina acts as an air and liquid proof barrier. Oxidation can't occur. The patina also acts as a thermal interface. The thermal interface is where the food meets the hot metal. The polymers of the patina are a much better thermal interface for cooking than the bare metal. This is because the patina facilitates the heat transfer from the pan into the food. The end result is that over time your pan becomes more non-stick and it cooks your food faster and better. This means you're able to control the temperatures, to get a better sear on steaks and burgers on a pan that has been thoroughly blackened than in a pan that is still early in its seasoning cycle. First, I want to go over the differences. Cast iron is created by pouring molten iron into a mold and then removing the pan from the mold, seasoning it and cooking. The casting process does leave indentations and marks on the surface of the pan. Traditionally, in the 19th century, the craftsmen who were making this would then smooth out those edges before selling the pan. You're not going to get that on the sorts of pans that you'll buy in a mass market store like Target or something. They are just making too many pans in order to go through that process. Modern companies that do, you're really paying for the labor of a craftsman to go and smooth out that pan before it gets seasoned. Carbon steel, very similar, starts off as bare metal, like this pan here that I've bought for demonstration purposes today. So where cast iron is made by pouring molten metal into a mold, steel is an alloy of iron, carbon, and a few other elements. A billet is forged, then that billet gets rolled out into a thin sheet, and the pieces of the pan are cut out and assembled. The handle for this pan is actually welded to the body of the pan. A lot of pan manufacturers will rivet. I prefer the welding because that means the interior of the cooking surface doesn't have any ridges or bumps or anything protruding where things will get stuck. It's a nice smooth interior. I have a number of pans here that are carbon steel and cast iron. A couple of cast iron fajita skillets that a friend gave to me recently. They were in real rough shape. They were rusted and not really fit for use. I cleaned them up. I managed to get the rust off of them, and then I put down a very basic coat of oil to start the seasoning, but I haven't done a full seasoning process on them. But yeah, other than that, these are lovely. They are nice and smooth, and I can't wait to get them into cooking shape. We have this new 8-inch carbon steel skillet. As you can see, it is still silver. It is a steel color. It has not been seasoned at all. There is a wax protective coating to keep it from rusting. I bought this just for the purposes of demonstration. What is the seasoning process? At a very base level, you need to heat up a pan, add oil, let that oil start to burn, and then it will start to form the polymers that form the patina. Matford Bourjat recommends a slightly different seasoning process than anything I've seen elsewhere. It goes a little bit further. It says to mix equal parts oil and kosher salt in the pan and then add the peel of one potato. Cook until the potato peels start to burn and then discard everything in the pan. Why? I put a lot of thought into it. The oil is there because that is the seasoning agent. That's what's going to bond to the pan as it polymerizes. The salt does a couple of things. One, it is additional thermal mass, so it's going to take extra time in order to heat up, but then it's also going to have a capillary action, much the way that if you pour water into a bed of sand, water will expand throughout as it gets pulled between the spaces in the grains of sand. That's going to happen with the salt and the oil. The salt bed is going to create capillaries that will pull the oil out and evenly coat the bottom of the pan. This is important so that the entire pan gets seasoned. The mystery ingredient is the potato skins. I thought long and hard about what this is. I considered the possibility that maybe the starches in the skins were adding something to the patina, or perhaps there were minerals in the potato skins that were leaching out into the oil and affecting it. The potato skins are a timing and temperature control mechanism. Potato skins are largely water. That water needs to boil off before the oil can reach a higher temperature. That's going to keep the temperature in the pan relatively low until that water has all boiled off, which means the pan is going to have more time to come up to an even temperature throughout, meaning you can get a nice even patina. The other thing is a timing mechanism. Once all of the water in the potato peels has boiled off, the temperature will start to rise in the pan and you'll start reaching that polymerization level. We need to talk about safety just a little bit. Be aware that this process does involve burning oil in your pan. It should be a controlled burn, a polymerization. It should not be a raging conflagration. A out of control oil burn is called a grease fire, and it can be very dangerous. So keep in mind, it's going to create a lot of smoke. Open up your windows, turn on your fans, get as much airflow as possible, and you'll be just fine. I am wearing long sleeves today, even though it's the middle of August, because there's going to be a fair amount of grease splatter. I don't really need those burns on my arms today. One last tip, you're going to need a place to put the hot oil, salt, and potato skins, so get yourself a metal bowl. Don't use a glass bowl, it can shatter from thermal shock. So get yourself a metal bowl and a towel. Put the towel down on your counter or a cutting board. Set the bowl on top of that, and that's where you will dump the contents of the pan that you're seasoning once you need to. Be sure you can put it in a place where you're not going to accidentally bump it, spill it out. It's going to stay hot for a long time. This pan still has a nice wax coating on it. I need to remove that before we get started. Be meticulous in this step. The more meticulous you are, the cleaner you get your pan now, the easier it will be to season, and the better that the seasoning will take and become nonstick in the long term. If you have any patches where there is still wax, that's going to form a barrier between the pan and the oil that's going to interrupt the seasoning process. So be meticulous. Get this as clean as you possibly can. You're going to need hot water from your sink, a rubber glove, and a steel wool. I happen to like SOS pads. I find that the very fine steel wool mixed with the cleaning agent in them does a really good job of getting the wax off of the pan. You need to get the wax off the entire interior surface of the pan as well as the exterior surface. It really comes down to just some elbow grease, hot water, and a good scrubber. You want the rubber glove to protect your hand not just from the water, but also from the SOS pad, because it takes a while and otherwise you end up with some splinters. After a couple of minutes, there are two ways you're going to be able to tell whether or not the coating has come off. First is by touch. As you scrub, the coating is giving resistance. As it disappears, your scrubber will just start to flow much more easily. The second, you'll be able to see the difference where there is still a wax coating and where there isn't. Check both visually and by touch as you're going along. I've only been working on the inside. I will work on the outside. So my pan is completely cleaned of the protective wax coating now, and it's time to get seasoning.
Start with a cold pan. Add 1/3 cup of oil and kosher salt, and the peel of 1 potato. Turn the burner on to medium heat. Make sure that the flames stay in the base of the pan and don't go up the lid. Stir the contents of the pan frequently to ensure that the entire pan is coated with oil. Be sure to spread oil up along the lip of the pan. As the pan comes up to temperature, you'll hear the potato peels start to sizzle. After a few minutes, the potato peels will begin to brown. You'll notice that the lip of the pan will begin to darken much faster than the base. This is because the oil, salt, and potato peels act as a heat sink on top of the base. This prevents the base from reaching extreme temperatures. The lip, without that protection, will reach a much higher temperature much more quickly. Continue cooking them until the potato peels begin to burn. Once the potato peels have burned, empty the skillet. Use a paper towel to clean the skillet as quickly as possible. You want to remove all of the salt and as much of the oil as you can, leaving only a very thin layer of oil. Once you've cleaned the pan, you'll notice that it begins to brown very rapidly. This is because the only heat sink left to the pan is a very thin layer of oil, which rapidly begins to polymerize. At this point, the next step is to repeat the entire process. You want to season the pan a second time over the stovetop before coating it with a very thin layer of oil and moving to the oven to finish the initial seasoning.
The final step in initial seasoning of a carbon steel or cast iron pan is to bake it on. A lot of people will actually just start by doing the oven seasoning. I like to do the stovetop and then move to the oven just because I really like the way that the patina starts to develop on the stovetop. So the process here is to make sure your pan is completely clean, then give it a very, very thin coat of oil. What I like to do is take just a few drops of oil in the pan and then wipe it around until the pan is shiny but doesn't look wet anywhere. What you want is just the thinnest layer of oil you can possibly manage, because that will create the thinnest patina without any high spots or low spots or puddles. It's important for the first time that you also season the backside of your skillet, because that is also raw metal. It needs to be protected. So some more oil on the back of that. Just give it a good rub. Very similar. You just want to have it be shiny but look dry. That will give it all the protection it needs without creating any weird bumps. With the Mat for Bourgeois, you don't need to season the handle. However, I really like the look of the handles once they do get seasoned. It's a different metal, so it doesn't take on quite the same hue, but it does turn this really wonderful chocolatey brown color. I really like it. It's purely for aesthetics, but I'm going to season the handle just because I think it looks really nice. It's nice to have things that are pretty. Transfer all of these into a 550 degree oven, and I'm going to put them in upside down. What that does is, as the pan heats up and oil becomes less viscous and starts to run out, it won't pool in the bottom of the pan. If it pools in the bottom of the pan and bakes on, you're going to have high spots and low spots where the oil starts to bake on and form rivulets. You don't want that. You want it perfectly smooth. So, putting each pan in upside down so that as the oil heats up and drips out, it drips out of the pan. After an hour in the oven at 550 degrees, I turned the oven off, I cracked the door, and I let these cool down for about 45 minutes. I checked each of the pans with my infrared laser thermometer, and that actually let me sort of confirm what I had said earlier, in that cast iron holds on to temperature longer. It's a better insulator. These pans are a solid 50 degrees hotter than the carbon steel, even though ultimately the carbon steel probably weighs a little bit more. I'm very happy with how these turned out. You can see they all have a nice even coloration to them now. I'm going to go ahead and give these all one last light coat of oil for the time being, and they are otherwise ready to use. And there you go. That's how you take a carbon steel or cast iron skillet from raw metal all the way to fully seasoned and ready to cook. Shout out to my friend John for suggesting I do this episode. I hope it's of use to everybody.